Ever since I watched the first Avengers movie and that silly little scene after the credits, you know, the one where they're sitting together in a shawarma joint, quietly chewing their food together, still in their super suits. It's quiet. They've just, saved the world from catastrophe, but they're sitting here. And apparently that's very important for us to know. But after that, I have always stayed until after the credits were rolling. That was the first time I had learned that there were after credits. And so I still do it, even if it's not a Marvel movement. These after credit scenes are like little nuggets of intrigue, giving hints about what is to come in the next movie. And I certainly don't want to miss them. So if you're like me and you sit through all these credits until the end, have you ever looked at the various roles that people play? Of course, there are the actors and the writers and the producers, but there are also costume designers, folks responsible for the sets, lighting, editing, music, sound effects, hair and makeup. And when the movie is animated, there's an even longer list of people. And sometimes, costumes are a part of animated things, and I'm not entirely sure how that works. But I'm always so amazed at how many people it takes to produce a movie and just how many get credit at the end. So we recently took our boys to see Inside Out 2 a couple weeks ago. Anybody else see it yet? Yeah. No. I'm only reading what's in the synopsis so that, yeah. We loved it. We loved the first one, but we absolutely loved the second. Both the original and the second movie are focused on the inside world, the emotions and the feelings of a girl named Riley as she goes through major transitions in her life. In the first one, the focus was on her emotional experience of moving across the country, I believe to San Francisco, is that correct? Yeah. At the age of 11, leaving all of her friends and childhood memories behind and starting a new life in a new place. That's super easy, right? Nothing could go wrong there. The second movie takes place 2 years later when she is 13. And she suddenly becomes aware of herself. And her inner world begins changing again as new emotions enter her control center. If you've ever seen the first one, you know the control center. There's joy, there's sadness, there's disgust, anger, and fear, I think, yeah. Well, in this movie, the control center gets a little bigger, as you can imagine. Both movies are very, very funny, and I cried during both of them, and I know you did too, so do not lie because we are in church. But the power of these movies is that we, the audience members, we feel these emotions with her. The specifics of these transitions in our lives are as varied as we all are, but that coming of age experience is pretty universal underneath the specifics. New feelings, new fears, new pimples, new reasons to feel insecure. And anxiety rules the day as you try to hold all of who you are or were with who you are becoming. Now, there are 9 young ladies, I don't know if you knew this, I learned this week, that had an incredible impact on this movie. And they didn't make it into the credits, which I'm a little frustrated by. But they are referred to as Riley's crew. Now, remember, Riley is the 13-year-old girl who's hit puberty and is experiencing a new life. But these 9 13 to 18-year-old girls from across the country, the director and the producer of the movie consulted with them throughout the entire screening process of the movie for 3 years, nearly every 4 months, to make sure that they got the emotions as close to accurate as possible. I'm sure that, all you need is 9 teenage girls to get all of them, but There were all kinds of people consulted for this movie, particularly a child psychologist, but Riley's crew was consulted specifically for their real life, current lived experience, and I love that. There was a recognition by those in charge that they needed an insider perspective. And that perspective came from teenage girls who were often not asked for their opinion and their perspective. That's a lot of wisdom on the part of the adults and an honor for the crew. So this masterpiece of a movie that makes us all feel something or a lot of somethings was a direct result of gifted people coming together to offer their expertise. And that expertise included an incredibly diverse representation of disciplines and talents, including the current lived experience of teenagers, the experience for which the whole movie is predicated on. Everyone mattered. Everyone's contribution, great or small, added to the whole and was therefore crucial to the success of the end product. Now, today's scriptures that Zach and I read speak to this very idea in the context of the church. The purpose and mission of the church is to love God and love people. That was what Jesus said was most important. And what he lived his life to showing us. That is what the work of discipleship is, to learn how to do that more and more every day together. But the church is a people, not a person. There isn't one person who does church. It is a community of people on mission together, loving and caring for one another, and walking alongside one another through life's journey. It isn't a solo act. It takes all of us. And whenever someone new joins the community changes. And that is a gift. Each person brings gifts and experiences to the table that allow all of us to see God better, who help us to do greater good because together we can do more and we can do it better. In our passage from 1 Corinthians, church planter Paul wrote to his siblings in Christ in the city of Corinth to teach them that everyone has something to offer for the greater good, but it is the same Spirit that creates these gifts. The same Spirit that brings harmony from individual parts, that creates a more whole body where everyone can offer what they have and receive what they need. All of us bring something to the table, something of great value and worth, and when we are freed to offer them, what a mighty force we are for good. The author of this letter mentions several gifts given by the Spirit that help us all, the church and the wider world, to be more whole. He mentions 9 specific gifts in this particular passage, and I would say we have a whole table more to talk about too. It's not an exhaustive list. But he shares that wisdom is given, and we all know how valuable that is. Knowledge is another. The gift of faith. You know, that person who just persists in trusting God when the rest of us are just shaking in our boots. To some are given gifts of healing, something many of us need but feel lost at knowing where and how to find it. Others are given the gift to perform miracles, or those things that seem impossible to most of us. He said some are given the gift of prophecy and the ability to tell spirits apart from one another, people who see what is true. People who see what is true and can't help but proclaim it. Both about where we are and where we are heading if we don't shift course. He said some are given the gifts of tongues and to others the interpretation of tongues. Folks who are able to communicate clearly when the rest of us are confused, speaking different languages, both actual language and even our viewpoint. When the rest of us are confused and feel lost, and those who can help translate the differences so that none of us are misunderstood. You can see how all of these might help a community to move forward in a healthy way if they are activated together. Our kind of mystical passage from Isaiah tells the story of the prophet by the same name being called by God to share God's truth with his people through a vision, a wild vision, a truth that was not pretty. But it was true all the same. It is rich with imagery. Winged creatures, the house filled with smoke, burning coals, and the prophet, at first only aware of his own unworthiness and his own brokenness, tells God, wait, I've messed up way too much. I'm not worthy to fulfill your mission. But then there's these like winged creatures that come and take some hot coals, touch his mouth. Suddenly, he is purified. It's a very interesting story, and it's very imaginative. So try to use your imagination for that. God's message to the people is one of judgment, of holding up a mirror to the depths of their destructive behavior. But it's also one of hope, that if they do indeed go another way, they would once prosper again. That doesn't feel at all relevant to our reality. But alas, Isaiah's and his people's story is a fascinating one. Maybe for another day, but what I want to focus on is this willingness to answer God's call right on the brink of a new and unknown reality. His people had just lost their king, a good king, and were looking to a new future unknown. His people had just lost, and the words that they were getting were judgment. The prophet's yes to doing the thing that God has placed within him to bring wholeness to his people, to do the painful and difficult thing of calling people to repentance when he knows it won't be received well. That is always our end of the deal, isn't it? To either respond with open hands and open hearts or to keep them closed. To say, here I am, work through me, when we darn well know that the future looks difficult at best. We need truth tellers like Isaiah. Folks who can't not share the truth, even and especially when it hurts. We need folks who can offer wisdom, who can share knowledge with us. We need folks who are full of faith, reminding us that God is with us when the rest of us are scared and angry and can only see red. We need folks who can offer healing when so many of us are hurting. And we need folks who can do the seemingly impossible, bringing us along with them. We need folks who can discern what's coming. Lord have mercy. Who can break barriers and find common ground and bring people together. We need all of these gifts. And more, because none of us can do all of these things. We really need each other. All of these gifts feel incredibly vital right now, do they not? In a time of political violence and division, when folks can't and won't listen to one another, when it seems easier to dismiss the other rather than listen to understand and even find common ground, when truth feels like it can be sold and twisted until it is unrecognizable, when all of us are broken and exhausted and are finding it hard to find our bearings, we need folks who can hold up the light and call us to rest in God's embrace. I recently saw a friend write that, yes, we are living in unprecedented times, but I wish we could just have a little bit of precedence. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, I know this next bit may sound a little ridiculous, but I absolutely know in my most inner knowing that the church can and will be a power for good if we trust in God to guide us. We cannot fix the world. That's not our job. But we can offer a counter-narrative to violence and division. We can be agents of healing and do seemingly impossible things because we are empowered by a God of impossible things. We won't do this perfectly, to be sure, but we can dare to imagine a world where the church is ignited, empowered, and infused with the Spirit to show up on the ground level and resist the tides of distress and destruction, to invest in goodness and reconciliation and common grounds, because all of this that is going on is a far cry from God's desire for us as a borough, for us as a country, for us as a global community. Something has to give. And we have history to see that it is possible, even if the road is hard and long. So we usually have a time at the end of whenever Zach and I speak, to kind of share what is stirring up in us. But I first want to ask you, when Zach told the story about the starfish, sorry you missed it, Keela, it was a great story, and asked us to identify what part we might play in the story. If you feel like sharing, we invite you to share that. What do you see as your part to play in that larger story? What's your role as you identify it?